I just want to say thank you for giving me the space to give back. There's two things. One thing that's most important in life, that's love. And what comes hand in hand with that is to serve. And tonight I get to serve, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you. So I'm going to tell you guys my story. So much of my childhood I don't remember. Where my story really begins is when I was 9 years old. I lost my mother. She passed away. She lost her battle to addiction and depression. And, you know, looking back now, I didn't really know as a kid how to handle that or what to do, or what was normal for that matter. So 9 was also the age when I first smoked weed. And it wasn't a constant thing that I did after that, but it definitely led into me doing bad in school. I enjoyed school for the social aspect, but not to go and learn and do homework. So I kind of just hung out with friends when I was even, you know, that young. I really didn't do much. I rode motorcycles a lot and just hung out. In my teens is really when I started dabbling with alcohol and other substances. And back then, addiction wasn't widespread. I mean, it was widespread, but it wasn't talked about as much, I feel like. So when I was about 13, 14, I started using alcohol, and it worked its way up to meth and pills and mushrooms and other things. There wasn't a whole lot to do. I grew up in Price. There wasn't much to do in Price. We partied a lot. So spent a lot of time partying in my teens. And that's really all I did. Like I said, I didn't do good in school. If I went, I wasn't paying attention. You know, and looking back again, it was a lack of a belief system that really led me astray. I didn't have anything more to believe in than what I was losing all around me. It's the only thing I was focused on. So I was quickly brought out of my house by the state of Utah and brought up into Utah County. So when I came to Utah County, I was in state's custody, and I remained in state's custody until I was 18 years old. So when I was 18, I went back to Price and started using drugs and partying again. There was always something in me that was lacking. There was a void that I didn't know how to fill other than drugs. And when I filled that void with drugs, I felt better about myself and where I was at in life. So it was my late teens was a mess. I found myself going to jail a lot. I didn't have a good relationship with my family, as good as I would want it to be. And I started selling drugs and just getting into that nightmare. So when I was 23, after super toxic relationships and codependent relationships that I'd put myself in, I decided to move. And the only way I knew how to move was to hitchhike out of Price. So I hitchhiked out of Price, and I came up to Salt Lake. And I had no idea that Salt Lake was what it is and has the issues that Salt Lake has. I was unaware of the homeless population up here. I was unaware of the addiction up here. So I went to the shelter and very quickly realized that it was really bad, and I needed to get out of here. I was doing it all for the wrong reason. I was chasing nothing. I didn't know what I wanted. I just wanted to leave because of the addiction. So I hitchhiked out of Salt Lake, and I ended up going to San Francisco, which I was completely unaware of San Francisco's problems as well. It was a horrible place for me to go to. And it was really sad to experience San Francisco the way that I did. And I got entrenched in that San Francisco street lifestyle very quickly. And it brought me really, really far down. And, I spent my whole life trying to fill that void with drugs and alcohol. And so I didn't grow up religious or spiritual at all, nor did my family. It was just something I wasn't aware of. When someone would speak about it, my brain would automatically push it aside. My brain wants me to do the easy things and stay comfortable with what it knows and what I know. And so when someone would, talk like I'm talking and share their experience, I would completely dismiss it. So I come back to Utah, nothing was a fix for me. I didn't do any kind of treatment until I was 24, and that was the first time I had any length of sobriety in my life. I was able to get into a sober living in Utah County, or in Salt Lake, and when I did that, I was fixing everything on the outside, so the outside looked really good, but my inside was still broken. Even though I felt like I was doing that internal work, it was missing the whole time. So I had 2 weeks shy of a year, and I ended up relapsing. And when I think back to that relapse, I had no reason to relapse. Nothing happened. I just was in a poor judgment and relapsed. And when I woke up in ICU at the LDS hospital with my family there, and a breathing tube in my throat. It was really sad. I couldn't remember even using. Yeah, it was a crazy moment for me. And I got out of the hospital and I went right back to using. And that's the sad thing about addiction. So when I get out of the hospital, I go right back to using. Nothing changed at all. Like I said, nothing could have changed because I didn't fix anything in me. So my outside world changed, but the inside was still the same. So when I ended up in a lot of trouble for stealing a vehicle in Salt Lake. I was on probation for a long time, 8 years, and I was in and out of jail the whole time using. And finally, they just said, we're done with you. We're terminating your probation unsuccessfully. And the first thing that my mind thought was, yes, now I can do what I want. I don't have to go to jail. I can use as much as I want. I don't have to deal with these guys anymore. So I went to jail for a few months, terminated probation. But when I terminated probation, I came out of jail and I had nowhere to go still. Since I was 18, I didn't do the responsibilities that I was supposed to do as a man to back myself and to have a house to live in and a job to go to. So it led to this long spree of homelessness that I felt like I couldn't get out of. But when I got out, so I got out of jail probably like March 8th of 2019, and I went right back to the shelter in Salt Lake and used heroin. That was the life. It was nothing different. It was no surprise to me. I always thought, so I started using heroin when I was 20 years old, after using pills for a long time. And I used heroin and then for 6 years, and then IV'd it for 6 years, constantly. And I remember having a conversation with my dad one time, and man, the stuff that I put my family through. He said, why can't you just stop? And I tried to explain to him, like, since I chose to use heroin and get in this addiction, like, I have a forever marriage with heroin now. Because that's what it felt like. No matter how the length of sobriety that I had or where I was at, it didn't matter. I had heroin constantly knocking at my brain. And that's what I thought I was going to live with for the rest of my life. So I used for those couple days. March 11th, when I went to sleep, so I remember like it was yesterday. I went to sleep, and the first thing that I was thinking was like, I need $10 in the morning. How am I gonna get that? And when I woke up, March 12th, 2019. So imagine everything that we know as human beings we're familiar with. It's rare that we run into things that are brand new to us, no matter where you're at. So imagine waking up and you have the eyes of a newborn baby, right? Colors are more vivid. Your touch is more, the biggest thing that happened to me was I had this separation within me. Like my mind, when I woke up, my mind was automatically in this slow motion state. And I had this monster in my mind my whole life that led me to destruction. And for this moment, it was done. Like I didn't have anything in my mind. It just wasn't there. The first thing I thought is, how can I go to bed normal, insane, and wake up insane? Right? Because I didn't know what was going on. In 2019, I hadn't heard of, the only time I heard of spiritual awakenings was in AA and NA and those kinds of groups. And like I said, my brain dispelled anything that anyone said about them. So that was the last thing that was on my mind, was that it was a spiritual awakening. So I started to get fed. When your mind is silent, when you can go into a deep meditation, or a meditation at all, that's the most secret, sacred form of communication with God. And it's like that because your mind is shut down. And it's rare that our minds get to shut down. So in that moment I woke up, I was automatically getting fed all of this stuff. It was like I was getting a download automatically. And that download was really my true self just exploding, is what it felt like. I knew that everything that had happened before me wasn't me anymore. The other thing that happened, so I've heard this in AA a lot too, that my obsession was my obsession was lifted. And my whole life I'm like, yeah, right. Because I had that forever marriage with heroin. I'm telling you, in that moment when I woke up, my obsession with heroin was completely lifted. It was the last thing that was on my mind. That monster that was knocking at my head for those 12 years was completely gone. But it was scary. What I was experiencing was super scary. I was alone. I didn't know how I could express this to anybody because they would think I was crazy. So it definitely wasn't a fix-all, because now I had this issue that the outside was completely out of alignment with my inside. Before that didn't matter. I wasn't aware of that. But now I felt this huge urge to make my outside match my inside. But I was outside sleeping. And so that wasn't an easy thing to do. My criminal mentality, I've done this my whole life. So my criminal mentality was like, I can sell heroin and get off the street, just stupid thinking. So I went right back into selling it. I didn't use, my clean date from heroin is March 12th, 2019. I haven't touched it since. I got in a taxi one night, and the taxi driver started talking to me. We had a pretty open conversation, and he was like, yeah, man, but your intentions are good. Like, that's what the universe cares about. Why are you selling all these things? And I was like, you're right, man. And when I got out of the taxi, I was like, he's wrong. Like, what I'm doing is wrong, and it's so out of place with me that, I need to get away from this. And I was so entrenched in it. The only way that I could think to do it, to get out of it, because how far I was, I had to leave. And this was a different leave from before. This time I had to leave, and my intentions with leaving were to stop everything that I was doing that wasn't in alignment with myself anymore, right? So I left, and I went to Chula Vista at the border of Mexico. I'd never been over there in my life, and it was scary. I was still alone, but it felt right, So what I did is I started walking, and when I was walking, I would stop and have conversations with as many people as I could, and just have that connection with humans, right? And see where everyone else was at. And I met so many amazing people, and the really intriguing part was I had met so many people that were going through a similar experience, you know? And I really started to understand what was going on with me. The sad thing is that most of these people that were experiencing the similar thing was that they were on the street and they weren't mentally capable of handling what was going on with them. So I hitchhiked. I stayed away from buses so I could have that, communication with people. I ended up going 550 miles up to San Francisco. Right when I got to San Francisco, I went out on the pier and I said a prayer. And the prayer was, I have no reason being out here on the streets, and I need a miracle. I need to get off the streets. And what I was fed was go back to Salt Lake. And it's October, mind you. That next day, I had some people from the city of San Francisco come up to me on the streets and ask me if I would want a bus ticket home. So I took that bus ticket home, and I came back to Salt Lake. A week later, I found myself in jail because of old warrants that I had, and I was so happy. Like, what perfect timing all this was. Like, I can rest. I felt everything was at its best besides my physical and mental self. Like, I needed rest. So my plan once I went into jail was to really focus on staying off the street, which meant going into a program and then going into sober living and then being able to expand myself from there. And that's exactly what happened. I got into a rehab. I'm super thankful for them. And it was right in alignment with everything that I'm going through. And then I was able to meet Ryan. Ryan came over and met me, and as soon as I heard the name I didn't attach it like I am recovery. I attached it to the famous I am from Jesus. And I was like, man, this is directly in line with me too. Like, I'm so stoked. Since then, I've realized that the reason that I got into addiction was because I had a spiritual disorder, right? Once I was in addiction, then the drugs start to mess with your brain. You can fix anything that you want to on the outside, but there's something on the inside that's missing, right? And what's missing, at least for me, I hate to speak for anybody, but that's usually what it is a spiritual disorder. Your belief system is completely out of whack, and it's usually due to some trauma in the past, right? You can feel it any way that you would like. The fix is going to be spirituality, and that's going to look different for any person, right? With spirituality comes self-awareness. That's when there's a separation that happens within you and your brain, your ego, and spirit, where you can start to control yourself. You can have control over your brain, right? You can have these pause moments before you actually go and make decisions. You can be in alignment with the universe and watch miracles completely unfold in front of you. Blessings are happening all around us, but most people are so unaware and unconscious throughout the day, of these miracles that are taking place in our life. And these miracles are, whatever you're going through in your life is directly in line with who you are on the inside. If you live a life of anxiety and depression and addiction, you're going to have that chaos on the outside. If you can do internal work, like to the core, and change your insides and your perception of the world and yourself, everything will brighten up and change for you. It takes work, and there's simple steps you can do to start gaining conscious awareness of your day. One thing I'll share before I stop is how many people in here thought about how they're sitting down right now. You're in autopilot, you walk in this room and you sit down. But at the moment to where you understand where your body's at and feel where your hands are at and where your neck's at, shoulders, that's what is conscious awareness, right? So in that moment that you're doing that steadying of your body, your brain can attack you at the same time. It's just like meditation. You have to do these constant steps, constant practices in order to change your inside. And it's a lifelong practice. But once you start to practice this and get the rewards, the lifelong practice becomes worth it. You know, what happened to me was so outside of me, and the miracles that I see unfold in front of me are so outside of me that it gives me a belief system. Now, I have something to believe in, you know, and it's way more than I could even fathom. You know, I'm super thankful that I get to give back now. I have people around me that are super in line with my life, and I have dreams, you know, and I'm achieving these dreams, and they're all in a line with myself. I'm super grateful that I was able to talk to you guys for a little bit, and thank you for coming.